The smell of roasted chicken and simmering gravy always brought me back to the same thought. Another Sunday, another family dinner. My name is Margaret, and I'm 77 years old. For as long as I can remember, this kitchen, this house, has been the heart of our family. My late husband, bless his soul, always said I was the glue. After he passed, I just kept on being the glue, I suppose. I wiped my hands on my apron, listening to the familiar sounds of my son, Ryan, 52, and his wife, Laura, 50, arriving. Their voices drifted in from the living room, a little louder than necessary, as always. Ryan was my eldest, and my daughter, Lily, lived out of state, so it was usually just these three for Sunday dinner, along with my grandson, Sam, who was 25 now. Sam was a good boy, a bit of a dreamer, an artist. He was usually the quietest at the table, observing us all. I'd spent my entire adult life as a school teacher, and every penny I earned, every bit of my pension, it all seemed to flow into this family. Ryan's college tuition, paid by me. Laura's unexpected appendectomy a few years back, when their insurance deductible was too high. I covered it, no questions asked. Even the down payment on their first car, a sensible sedan, came from my savings. I never regretted it. Not truly. I believed in investing in my children, in their futures. It was what mothers did. I remembered the early days, when Ryan was just a little tyke, and then later, when Sam was born. Laura went back to work pretty quickly, and I was always there, ready to babysit. I'd juggle laundry, cook dinner, and keep an eye on Sam, all while preparing lesson plans for the next day. Family gatherings, always at my house, always me doing the bulk of the cooking, the cleaning, the organizing. It just became the way things were. Nobody ever really said thank you, not in so many words anyway. A pat on the shoulder, a quick, "This is good, Mom," and then they were off to their own lives, leaving me with the dishes and the quiet house. I told myself it was fine, that their success was my gratitude. The dining room table was set, the good china out. Ryan and Laura finally drifted into the kitchen, Ryan already reaching for a piece of chicken. "Smells great, Mom," he mumbled, his mouth half full. Laura offered a tight smile. "It does, Margaret. You always outdo yourself." Sam wandered in a few minutes later, his usually messy hair even more disheveled. "Hey, Grandma," he said, giving me a quick, genuine hug. "Smells amazing." He was the only one who still called me Grandma. Ryan and Laura had started calling me Margaret a few years ago, which always felt a little distant. We sat down, and the conversation quickly turned to Ryan's latest obsession, a new boat. "It's a beauty, Mom," he declared, gesturing with his fork. 22 feet, twin engines. Laura and I are thinking of putting a deposit down next month. Just need to figure out the financing. He looked at me, a casual, expectant glance. I swallowed, a piece of chicken, suddenly feeling like sawdust. I knew what that glance meant. It meant he expected me to offer, to help, again. Just last month, I'd helped them with a hefty property tax bill they'd forgotten about. My pension wasn't limitless, but they talked as if it were a bottomless well. I just nodded, trying to keep my expression neutral. Laura, to her credit, looked a little uncomfortable, picking at her food. She usually did when Ryan got like this. Dinner continued, a blur of Ryan's grand plans and Laura's quiet interjections. Sam tried to steer the conversation to his art, but Ryan quickly steamrolled him. After dessert, I began clearing the table. a familiar routine. Ryan and Laura retreated to the living room, their voices dropping to a murmur. I could hear them through the thin wall, just barely. "Can't keep doing this, Ryan," Laura whispered. I know, Ryan replied, his voice low but dismissive. It's a lot, isn't it? I mean, when Mom finally passes, we won't have to worry about the house anymore. It'll be yours, free and clear. My hand, holding a stack of plates, froze. The clatter of china almost slipped from my grasp. When Mom finally passes, not if, not someday, but when, and the house, my house, the one I'd paid for, maintained, poured my life into. They were already counting it, counting me out. A cold knot formed in my stomach, tightening with each beat of my heart. The seeds of something new, something unsettling, had just been planted. A few weeks after that Sunday dinner, the weather turned warm enough for a family picnic. Ryan, Laura, and Sam came over to my house, and we packed up a cooler and some blankets to head to the local park. I'd made my famous potato salad, of course, and baked a fresh batch of cookies. As I carefully placed the cooler in the trunk of Ryan's car, he sighed dramatically. "Mom, are you sure you need to carry that? It looks heavy. You know, at your age, you should really be careful." He didn't offer to help, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching me. Laura chimed in. "He's right, Margaret. We don't want you throwing out your back. Who would make dinner then?" She laughed, a light, airy sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. I just offered them a tight smile. "I'm perfectly capable, thank you," I said, hoisting the cooler with a little more effort than I usually would, just to prove a point. Sam, bless his heart, quickly stepped forward and took it from me. "Here, Grandma, let me get that. You made enough for an army." He winked, and for a moment, the knot in my stomach loosened. At the park, we found a spot under a large oak tree. Ryan immediately pulled out his phone, scrolling through something, while Laura started setting out the paper plates. I tried to engage them. "Did you hear about Mrs. Henderson down the street? Her grandson just got into medical school." Ryan grunted without looking up. "That's nice, Mom." Laura glanced over. "Oh, the one who's always complaining about her knees. Good for him." She turned back to arranging the napkins. I tried again. "I was thinking about joining that new book club at the community center. They're reading The Grapes of Wrath this month." Ryan finally looked up, a slight frown on his face. "Book club? Mom, aren't you busy enough? And isn't that a bit depressing? Why don't you just watch some TV?" He exchanged a quick glance with Laura, who gave a subtle eye roll. My shoulders slumped almost imperceptibly. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the casual dismissal, the way they spoke to me as if I were a child, or perhaps a very old, slightly senile relative who needed to be humored. Every attempt I made to share a thought, an interest, was met with a polite but firm wall. They weren't interested in me, Margaret. They were interested in the Margaret who provided, who was predictable, who stayed in her lane. A few weeks later, it was my granddaughter's 7th birthday party. Her name is Emily, and she's a sweet, bright girl. I'd been looking forward to helping Laura plan it, as I always had for family birthdays. I'd offered to bake the cake, to help with decorations, even to organize some games. "Oh, don't worry about it, Margaret," Laura had said over the phone, her voice a little too cheerful. My friend Brenda, she's an event planner, and she's just so good at this kind of thing. She's taking care of everything. I felt a pang, but I tried to brush it off. Maybe she just wanted to try something new. But when I arrived at the party, held at a local play cafe, it became clear. Brenda was indeed there, directing everything, but so were half a dozen of Laura's other friends, all bustling around, laughing and setting things up. I stood awkwardly by the entrance, holding Emily's present, feeling like an uninvited guest. Laura spotted me and waved. "Margaret, you made it. Come on in." But she didn't come over to greet me, just gestured vaguely towards a table. I watched as Brenda and Laura's friends organized the games, handed out party favors, and even cut the cake. I wasn't asked to help, wasn't even consulted. My suggestions for Emily's favorite games had clearly been ignored. I saw Emily run up to Brenda, giving her a big hug, thanking her for the best party ever. I sat at a small table by myself, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, watching the festivities unfold around me, my own granddaughter's party, and I felt like a stranger. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I wasn't just being taken for granted. I was being actively sidelined. My role was diminishing, not just in their financial plans, but in their lives. I was becoming an afterthought, a quiet presence they tolerated, rather than an integral part of their family. The casual entitlement I'd noticed at dinner, the snarky comments at the picnic, it all coalesced into a sharp, painful truth. I was irrelevant. I finished my coffee and quietly slipped out, making my excuses to Laura about feeling a bit tired. She barely registered my departure, already distracted by a spilled juice box. As I drove home, the silence in my car was deafening. The seeds planted weeks ago had begun to sprout, pushing through the soil of my denial. I was no longer just uneasy. I was beginning to truly see, and what I saw was a reflection of my own diminishing role, a quiet, painful realization that I was becoming a burden, not a blessing, in the eyes of my own children. The thought was a bitter pill, but swallowed it I did, knowing that something, somewhere, had to change. The phone rang midweek, a few days after Emily's party. It was Ryan. His voice, usually so confident, had a strange, almost overly casual lilt to it. "Hey, Mom," he began. "Laura and I were wondering if you had a minute to look over some paperwork for us. It's for a family project, something to do with investments, for the future." My instincts, dulled by years of trusting my children, pricked up. Family project. Investments. It sounded vague, too vague, but a part of me, the part that still desperately wanted to believe in their good intentions, pushed the doubt aside. Maybe it was something genuinely beneficial for all of us. Maybe they were finally including me in a meaningful way. "Of course, dear," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "When would you like me to look at it?" "Great. How about tomorrow afternoon? We can swing by after work. It won't take long, just a signature or two." The next day, Ryan and Laura arrived, carrying a thick manila envelope. They sat at my dining room table, spreading out a few pages. It was a complex-looking document, filled with legal jargon and small print. "So, what exactly is this?" I asked, squinting at a paragraph about asset allocation. Ryan waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, just some standard stuff, Mom. It's a new investment vehicle we're looking into, a way to pool some family resources for better returns. For everyone's benefit. It just needs your signature as a a beneficiary almost, to show you're on board with the family plan. Laura nodded, avoiding my gaze. It's really just a formality, Margaret. Nothing to worry about. They quickly flipped past several pages, pointing to a line where I needed to sign. They didn't offer to let me read the whole thing, didn't explain the details of the investment vehicle or how my beneficiary status would work. My unease grew. This wasn't how responsible adults handled important financial documents. This felt rushed and manipulative. I hesitated, my pen hovering over the signature line. The memory of Ryan's casual remark about when Mom finally passes still echoed in my mind. The feeling of being sidelined at Emily's party. It all added up to a growing suspicion. But then I looked at their faces. Ryan's earnest, if slightly too eager expression, Laura's quiet, almost guilty demeanor, my desire to trust them, to believe they wouldn't intentionally harm me, won out. I signed. There you go, I said, handing the pen back. I hope it helps with your project. Ryan beamed. Fantastic, Mom. We knew we could count on you. He quickly gathered the papers, stuffing them back into the envelope. They left shortly after, their cheerful goodbyes feeling hollow. Later that week, a restless feeling settled over me. I couldn't shake the nagging doubt about that document. I decided to go up to the attic. It was a place I hadn't visited in a while, a dusty repository of memories. I climbed the creaky stairs, the air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten things. Up there, amidst forgotten furniture and boxes of holiday decorations, I found the old shoebox. It was a treasure trove of my life, faded photographs of my husband and me when we were young, my children's first drawings, letters from my parents, and tucked beneath it all, the original deed to this house. The house I'd worked so hard for, paid for, maintained. I ran my fingers over the embossed paper, remembering the day we finally paid off the mortgage. It represented security, stability, a legacy for my children. Looking at those mementos, I felt a wave of vulnerability wash over me. All those years of sacrifice, of putting my family first. Had it been worth it? Had they truly appreciated it? Or had I just enabled their entitlement? The tension I felt from their behavior, the subtle shifts in their attitudes, suddenly felt more pronounced, more sinister. I was still in the attic, lost in thought, when I heard their voices drift up from downstairs. Ryan and Laura must have come over unexpectedly. I heard the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation. I should go down, I thought. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the lingering doubt about the document, or the quiet shame of having signed it without fully understanding. Then I heard Ryan's voice, clearer this time. And Kai. And with Mom's signature on that, it just makes everything smoother. Less hassle when the time comes. We can just sell the house, split the proceeds, and finally get that boat. Laura's voice, a little softer, a little more hesitant. Are you sure this is the right way, Ryan? It feels manipulative. Manipulative? Laura, she's 77. She barely knows what she's signing anymore. She's a financial drain, honey. We're doing her a favor, really, making sure everything's taken care of her. Taken care of her, balkansir, bajansar, tisav, and intern. Besides, it's not like she's going to live forever. We need to be prepared. We've already got the funeral home lined up, remember? Just need to finalize the details. The shoebox slipped from my trembling hands, scattering old photographs across the dusty floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. Funeral home lined up. Financial drain. She barely knows what she's signing anymore. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The family project, the investments, the casual disregard for my questions. It wasn't about me being a beneficiary. It was about them being beneficiaries of my death. I wasn't just walking into a betrayal. I was already in the middle of it, and I had just signed my own name to their scheme. The sound of the shoebox hitting the floor echoed in the quiet attic, but downstairs, Ryan and Laura were too engrossed in their conversation to notice. My hands were shaking so violently, I had to grip the dusty banister to steady myself. The words replayed in my mind, each one a fresh stab to my heart. Financial drain. Barely knows what she's signing. Funeral home lined up. I felt a cold, burning rage ignite deep within me. It wasn't just anger, it was a profound, gut-wrenching betrayal. My own children, the ones I had poured my entire life into, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle, a burden, a means to an end. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were actively planning for it, eager to cash in on my passing. I descended the stairs, each step heavy with a newfound resolve. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from a fierce, protective instinct I hadn't felt in years. I walked into the living room, where Ryan and Laura sat on the sofa, a half-empty bottle of wine and 2 glasses on the coffee table between them. They looked up, startled by my sudden appearance. "Mom, we didn't hear you come down," Ryan said, a forced smile on his face. "Everything all right?" My voice, when it came, was a low, trembling whisper, but it carried the weight of decades of unspoken sacrifice. "Everything all right? You're discussing my funeral. You're talking about me as a financial drain. You just had me sign a document under false pretenses so you could smooth things over when I'm gone." Ryan's face paled. Laura's eyes darted between him and me, a flicker of panic in her expression. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Ryan tried to bluster, but his voice cracked. "You must have misheard us. We were just talking about estate planning, for everyone's benefit. Standard stuff." "Estate planning?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Lining up a funeral home? Discussing how much of a hassle it will be when I'm gone? Is that what you call estate planning, Ryan?" My voice rose, gaining strength with each word. I overheard every word, every dismissive, cruel word. "You think I'm a fool? You think I'm too old to understand that you're just waiting for me to die so you can sell my house and buy your precious boat?" Laura finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "Margaret, please, it's not like that. We just want to be prepared." "It's practical." "Practical?" I cried, my voice cracking with emotion. "Is it practical to lie to your mother, to manipulate her into signing documents she doesn't understand, to see her as a burden instead of a person who loves you, who has given you everything she has?" Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not now, not in front of them. Ryan, recovering his composure slightly, tried to play it off. He even chuckled, a short, nervous sound. "Mom, come on. Don't be so dramatic. We're just being realistic. Everyone dies, and we just want to make sure everything is handled properly. It's not like we're wishing you ill. We love you." The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. "Love me," I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "Is this how you show love? By plotting my demise? by seeing me as a financial burden to be offloaded, by laughing at the idea of me wanting to join a book club because I'm too old. My voice was trembling, but my gaze was steady, unwavering. I have given you everything, my time, my money, my home, and this is how you repay me? With disrespect and deceit? Ryan actually laughed then, a short, sharp bark. Mom, you're being ridiculous. You're overreacting. You always do. We're just talking about the future. It's not a big deal. Laura looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. That laughter, that dismissive, mocking sound, was the final blow. It shattered whatever fragile hope I had left that they might feel remorse, that they might understand the depth of their cruelty. The humiliation was absolute. My heart felt like it was crumbling into a million pieces, but amidst the devastation, a tiny spark ignited, a spark of defiance. I didn't say another word. I simply turned and walked away, leaving them in the living room. I walked into my bedroom, the familiar space suddenly feeling alien. I sat down in my old rocking chair, the one my husband had given me years ago. The silence was deafening, broken only by the frantic beating of my own heart. The tears finally came, hot and stinging, tracing paths down my wrinkled cheeks. I cried for the betrayal, for the years of unappreciated sacrifice, for the illusion of family I had so desperately clung to. But as the tears subsided, a quiet, steely resolve began to form within me. The devastation was profound, yes, but it had also awakened something, a sense of survival, a fierce determination to reclaim my dignity, to set a boundary they would never forget. They thought I was a financial drain, a burden, a fool who didn't know what she was signing. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. This was my breaking point, but it was also my beginning. The days that followed my confrontation with Ryan and Laura were a blur of raw emotion. My home, once my sanctuary, now felt like a mausoleum of broken trust. Every corner held a memory, but now those memories were tainted by the bitter taste of betrayal. I walked through the rooms, the silence deafening, processing the shock. My heart ached, a deep, hollow pain that settled in my chest. Yet, beneath the pain, a quiet determination began to solidify. I spent the first few days mostly alone, the phone calls from Ryan and Laura going unanswered. I knew they were calling, probably trying to smooth things over, to deny what I had heard, but I wasn't ready to listen to their lies. I cooked simple meals for myself, a piece of toast for breakfast, a cup of soup for lunch. The elaborate Sunday dinners, the constant provision for others, felt like a distant, painful memory. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started taking small steps towards reclaiming my life. The first was cooking, just for myself. It felt strange, almost selfish, but also liberating. I seasoned my food exactly how I liked it, ate when I was hungry, and left the dishes for later if I felt like it. There was no one to please, no one to impress. Then, one sunny Tuesday, I decided to venture out. I remembered the book club I'd mentioned to Ryan, the one he'd scoffed at. I found the flyer tucked away in a drawer and drove to the community center. It was a bustling place, full of people my age and older, chatting, laughing, engaged in various activities. I found the room for the book club. The topic was indeed the grapes of wrath. I sat in the back, a little nervous at first, but as the discussion began, I found myself drawn in. The facilitator, A kind-faced woman named Eleanor encouraged everyone to share their thoughts. I even spoke up once, offering a perspective on Majode's resilience that seemed to resonate with the group. After the meeting, Eleanor smiled at me. "That was a wonderful insight, Margaret. We're glad you joined us." Her genuine warmth was a balm to my wounded spirit. Over the next few weeks, I started attending more community events, a weekly craft group, a low-impact exercise class. I reconnected with Edith, my childhood friend, who was 73. We met for coffee at a small cafe downtown, a place we hadn't been to in years. "Margaret, you look different," Edith observed, her eyes kind and knowing. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then poured out the whole story, the overheard conversation, the signed document, the confrontation. Edith listened patiently, her hand resting over mine. "Oh, Margaret," she said softly when I finished. "My dear friend, I always worried they took advantage of your good nature. You've given them so much." Her understanding, her lack of judgment, was exactly what I needed. "I feel like such a fool, Edith, for not seeing it sooner, for letting them walk all over me." "You're not a fool, Margaret," Edith said firmly. "You're a loving mother. You saw the best in them, even when it wasn't there. That's not foolishness. That's a good heart. But now you see them for who they truly are. And what are you going to do about it?" Her question hung in the air, challenging me. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about what I would do with this newfound clarity. I started replaying moments in my mind, moments where my needs had been sidelined for their benefit. The time I wanted to renovate the bathroom, but Ryan insisted I help him with a down payment for a new car. The times I felt exhausted after babysitting, but Laura would just say, "Oh, you're such a natural with kids, Margaret. It's hardly work for you." It wasn't just isolated incidents. It was a pattern, a slow erosion of my own well-being for their convenience. One afternoon at the community center, I was sitting alone, sipping tea after a particularly lively game of bingo. An older woman with bright, intelligent eyes and a shock of white hair sat down across from me. She introduced herself as Helen. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked, her voice warm. "I'm Helen. I just moved into one smaller place after selling my big house. Best decision I ever made." We chatted for a while, and I found myself, surprisingly, opening up to her a little. Not about the betrayal, not yet, but about feeling a bit lost, about wanting to find a new purpose. Helen listened, nodding. "You know," she said, "it's never too late to start over, to reclaim your life." Sometimes the biggest challenges are just opportunities in disguise, opportunities to find out what you're truly made of. Her words resonated deeply. Reclaim your life. That was it. That was what I needed to do. Helen's simple kindness, her quiet strength, ignited a spark of hope within me. I had been devastated, humiliated, but now, surrounded by new friends and new possibilities, I felt a flicker of something else. Power. The power to choose my own path, to define my own worth, and to finally truly reclaim my life from those who had taken it for granted. The conversation with Helen, coupled with Edith's unwavering support, solidified my resolve. I had spent weeks processing the shock, the anger, the humiliation. Now it was time to act. My first step was one I had never imagined taking, visiting a lawyer. I found Mr. Davies's office in a quiet part of downtown, a dignified old building with a brass nameplate. His receptionist, a kind woman with a gentle smile, led me into his office. Mr. Davies himself was a man in his late 50s, with a calm demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes. I sat across from his large oak desk, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, his voice soft, "how can I help you today?" I took a deep breath and, for the second time in as many weeks, recounted the entire story. My years of financial support, the casual entitlement, the overheard conversation, the deceptive document. I explained how I had signed something I didn't fully understand, something Ryan had called a family project, but which I now suspected was a way to gain control over my assets. Mr. Davies listened patiently, nodding occasionally, making notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Thompson, what you've described is deeply concerning. It sounds like your son and daughter-in-law may have engaged in financial elder abuse, or at the very least exerted undue influence. We need to get to the bottom of what you signed." He asked me to gather any financial records I had, bank statements, receipts for tuition payments, copies of utility bills I'd covered for them, anything that showed my contributions. He also asked about the document I'd signed. I told him I didn't have a copy, that Ryan had taken it immediately. "That's not ideal, but not insurmountable," he assured me. "We can request copies from the relevant institutions. For now, let's start with what you have." Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own home. I went through old files, dusty boxes, and forgotten envelopes. Each receipt, each canceled check was a painful reminder of my generosity. There was the tuition for Ryan State University, nearly $40,000 over 4 years. The down payment on their first house, a substantial sum that had depleted a significant portion of my savings. The medical bills for Laura's appendectomy and later for Emily's braces. Countless smaller amounts for car repairs, property taxes, even groceries when they were a little tight. As I laid out the evidence on my dining room table, a shocking realization dawned on me. It wasn't just a few favors here and there. It was a constant, relentless drain. My pension, my savings, my entire financial life had been systematically siphoned off to support their comfortable lifestyle. The total, when I finally tallied it, was staggering, far more than I had ever consciously acknowledged. They hadn't just taken me for granted. They had financially crippled me, all while living off my generosity. The anger I had felt before was nothing compared to this cold, calculated fury. Then I found it. Tucked away in the shoebox from the attic, beneath the old photographs, was the original deed to my house. I pulled it out, the thick paper feeling substantial in my hands. This house, my home, the one they were so eagerly waiting to inherit, the one they had already mentally sold to buy a boat. I looked at the deed, then at the piles of financial records spread across the table. In that moment, the true extent of my power became clear. This house was mine, free and clear. It was my most significant asset, the one thing they coveted above all else, and it was entirely within my control. The document I had signed, whatever it was, couldn't override the legal ownership of this deed. Not without my consent, and certainly not without my full, informed understanding. A wave of exhilaration washed over me, mixed with a healthy dose of fear. I held the key to my freedom, the power to change my situation entirely. I could sell the house, yes, but that would still benefit them, in a way, by removing the burden of my existence. No, I wanted to send a message that would resonate far beyond a simple sale. I remembered a conversation I'd had with Edith a few months ago, before all this came to light. She had mentioned a local women's shelter that was struggling for funding, a place that offered refuge to women escaping difficult situations. A seed was planted. I called Mr. Davies the next morning. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice steady, "I want to discuss transferring the ownership of my house. Not selling it, transferring it." He paused. "To whom, Mrs. Thompson?" "To a women's shelter," I replied, looking at the deed, a fierce sense of purpose filling me. "I want to give them my home." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Mr. Davies said, "That's a very generous offer, Mrs. Thompson. We can certainly explore the legalities of that. It will be a significant step." "I know," I said, my heart steady, "and I'm ready to take it." The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath my resolve, but the exhilaration was stronger. I was taking back control, and this time it wouldn't be for them. It would be for me and for others who truly needed it. The days that followed my decision to transfer the house to the women's shelter were a whirlwind of activity. Mr. Davies was incredibly efficient, guiding me through the legal process with reassuring clarity. First, we addressed my finances. I closed my old bank accounts and opened new ones at a different bank, ensuring Ryan and Laura had no possible access. I also updated my will, explicitly stating that my assets, whatever remained, would be distributed to specific charities and to Sam, my grandson, who had always shown me genuine affection. I made sure Ryan and Lily were excluded entirely. It felt drastic, but necessary. The calls from Ryan and Laura had become more frequent, more insistent. I still hadn't answered any of them. I knew this silence was unnerving them, and I wanted them to feel the discomfort of my absence before I delivered the final blow. One afternoon, about a week after my meeting with Mr. Davies, Ryan showed up at my door, unannounced. He looked agitated, his usual confident swagger replaced by a nervous energy. "Mom, why haven't you been answering my calls?" he demanded, stepping into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. Laura was right behind him, her face a mixture of concern and irritation. I met his gaze, my own steady. "Because I haven't felt like talking, Ryan." "What's going on?" he pressed, his voice rising. "You've been acting strange. And Laura said you closed your old bank accounts. What's all this about?" I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. "It's about boundaries, Ryan, and consequences." "Consequences," Laura interjected, her voice sharp. "What are you talking about, Margaret? We're your family." "My family who plotted my funeral?" I asked, my voice calm, but firm. "My family who called me a financial drain and manipulated me into signing a document you refused to explain? That family?" Ryan's face flushed. "Mom, we already talked about that. You misunderstood. We were just being practical." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I understood perfectly, and I've decided that I can no longer support your lifestyle. My days of being your personal ATM are over." His jaw dropped. "What? Are you serious?" "Mom, we need your help. We're about to put a deposit on that boat, remember? And the property taxes are due next month. You always help with the property taxes." "Not anymore," I stated plainly. "You are both capable adults. It's time you manage your own finances." Laura stepped forward, her voice pleading. Margaret, please, we're in a tight spot. You can't just cut us off like this. What about the house? You know we're counting on that. The house? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, the house. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. That's actually why I wanted to speak with you both. I've made some arrangements for the house. Ryan looked at me, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes. Arrangements? What kind of arrangements? I'm transferring the deed, I said, my voice clear and unwavering, to the local women's shelter. It will be finalized by the end of the week. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's face went from flushed to ashen. Laura gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You're joking, right? Ryan stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The women's shelter? Our inheritance? Mom, you can't do that. That's illegal. That's crazy. It's perfectly legal, Ryan, I replied, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. Mr. Davies, my lawyer, has handled all the paperwork. As for crazy, I think what's crazy is for two grown adults to expect their elderly mother to fund their lavish lifestyle while simultaneously wishing her dead. Laura burst into tears. Margaret, how could you? This is our home. This is Emily's future. This was my home, I corrected her gently, though my heart was steady. And it will soon be a home for women who truly need refuge. As for Emily's future, perhaps you should have thought about that before you started planning my funeral. Ryan, his face contorted with rage, took a step towards me. You manipulative old woman. You can't do this to us. We'll fight you. We'll tie this up in court for years. I met his fury with a calm I hadn't known I possessed. You can try, Ryan, but the deed is clean, and my mind is clear. I'm of sound mind, and I've made my wishes known. You've taken enough from me. Now I'm taking back what's mine, and I'm giving it to people who will appreciate it. I walked past them towards the front door and opened it wide. I think it's time you both left. I have a new life to start, and you, well, you have a boat to finance. They stood there, stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief, anger, and dawning panic. The comfortable life they had taken for granted, built on my sacrifices, was crumbling before their eyes. As they stumbled out, muttering threats and accusations, I closed the door behind them. The silence that followed was not deafening this time. It was peaceful. My heart was steady, my resolve unwavering. The house, my home, would soon be a beacon of hope for others. And I, Margaret Thompson, was finally free. The new room at the women's shelter was small, but it was mine. A single bed, a small dresser, a window, looking out onto a quiet garden. It was a stark contrast to the sprawling house I had lived in for 50 years. But here, there was a different kind of warmth. A warmth that came from shared stories and genuine understanding. I'd been here for a few days now. The women were from all walks of life, but they shared a common thread. They were rebuilding. There was Maria, a young woman with 2 small children, escaping a difficult marriage. There was Brenda, closer to my age, who had lost everything in a scam. We sat together in the common room, sharing cups of tea, talking about our pasts and our hopes for the future. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, truly heard. It was a community I hadn't realized I was so desperately missing. I thought about my old home, the one that was now officially the property of the shelter. I imagined the bustling activity, the new life it would hold. It filled me with a quiet satisfaction. My sacrifice, my home, would truly benefit others, not just enable the selfish whims of my children. Of course, I missed my grandchildren. Emily, with her bright eyes and infectious giggle, and Sam, my artistic grandson, who had always had a gentle soul. I knew this decision would impact them, and that was the hardest part. But I also knew that I deserved better than the treatment I had received from Ryan and Laura. My well-being, my dignity, had to come first. I couldn't teach them respect by continuing to allow their disrespect. Perhaps, in time, they would understand. Perhaps. I hadn't heard directly from Ryan or Laura since that day at the house. Mr. Davies had informed me that they had indeed tried to challenge the transfer, but their efforts were quickly shut down. The deed transfer was legally sound, and my mental capacity was unquestionable, thanks to a recent medical evaluation I had undergone at Mr. Davies's suggestion. They were left with nothing but their anger and their mounting financial woes. I heard snippets from Edith, who occasionally still spoke with Laura, though their conversations were strained. The boat, of course, was out of the question. Ryan had lost a significant deposit he'd put down, thinking my help was guaranteed. Their property taxes were overdue, and they were arguing constantly about money. Laura had apparently picked up extra shifts at work, and Ryan was scrambling to find new ways to make ends meet, something he hadn't truly had to do in years. The comfortable cushion I had provided for so long was gone, and they were flailing. It wasn't revenge I sought, but a lesson, and it seemed they were learning it, albeit painfully. One afternoon, a few weeks after I moved in, I received a small hand-drawn card. It was from Sam. Inside, a simple message. Grandma, I miss you. I hope you're okay. I understand. I think. Love, Sam. No mention of Ryan or Laura. No accusations. Just quiet understanding. A small smile touched my lips. Sam. He was a good boy. Perhaps there was still hope for him. I sat by the window, a cup of herbal tea warming my hands. The morning sun streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. My body felt lighter, my mind clearer. The weight of sacrifice, the burden of unappreciated love had lifted. I was no longer defined by what I gave, but by what I reclaimed. My life wasn't over. It was simply taking a new, unexpected turn. I had found my voice, asserted my worth, and in doing so, had created a ripple effect. Ryan and Laura were left to grapple with the stark reality of their choices, with the void my absence had created in their lives. They had taken me for granted, seen me as a burden, and now they were left to face the consequences of their actions, unassisted. As for me, Margaret Thompson, I was simply enjoying the quiet peace of a morning, sipping my tea, surrounded by new friends, and embracing a future I had chosen for myself. A future built not on obligation, but on strength, resilience, and a profound, hard-won dignity.